The Secretary and the Billionaire English version, 8,000 words. The phone in her hand trembled when she saw the message. Isabella Martinez read the words once, twice, 3 times before her brain processed what they meant. Fired, effective immediately, no explanation. The lobby of the city's most exclusive skyscraper blurred around her as tears threatened to fall. She had worked 3 years as an executive secretary at Blackstone Enterprises, had sacrificed nights, weekends, had put her soul into every project. And now, at 26, she found herself in the marble hallway with a cardboard box in her hands and her heart shattered into pieces. What she didn't know was that Damien Blackstone, the billionaire owner of the company, was watching her from the 42nd floor with an expression no one had ever seen on his face before. What she also didn't know was that her firing hadn't been his decision. Hey there, before we continue with this story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It thrills me to imagine all the places these words reach. And remember, subscribing is free, and with just 1 click, you become part of our family. Now, let's get back to this story that will change everything you thought you knew about love and second chances. Isabella left the building with mechanical steps. The cold November air hit her face and reminded her that life continued even though her world had stopped. In the box, she carried her belongings, a small plant she had cared for over the years, a white ceramic mug with a small crack she had never had the heart to throw away, and a red-covered notebook where she wrote her thoughts when stress overwhelmed her. That notebook had been her secret refuge, the place where she poured out her dreams of someday having her own event planning company, where she drew designs she never dared show anyone. As she walked toward the subway station, Isabella remembered the exact moment when everything had started to change. It had been 3 weeks ago, during the monthly board meeting. She had been organizing documents when she heard Patricia Summers, the human resources director, whisper something in Damien's ear. Isabella had managed to catch fragments: secretary, too close, not appropriate, company image. At the time she hadn't understood, but now everything made sense. Patricia had misinterpreted the long hours Isabella spent working with Damien as something more than professionalism. The truth was much more complex. Isabella had started to feel something for her boss, something she would never have dared confess. Damien Blackstone was everything she shouldn't desire: millionaire, powerful, unreachable. But in the quiet moments of the office, when they worked late preparing presentations, Isabella had glimpsed the man behind the suit. She had seen him take off his glasses and rub his tired eyes, had heard him speak tenderly on the phone with his younger sister, had noticed how he always left extra tips at the building's cafe, small gestures that revealed a heart he kept carefully hidden. In the apartment she shared with her best friend Sophia, Isabella collapsed on the couch and finally allowed the tears to flow. Sophia, who worked as a nurse at the public hospital, arrived that night to find Isabella surrounded by used tissues with the red notebook open on her lap. "What happened?" Sophia asked, sitting beside her. Isabella told her everything: the firing, the suspicions about Patricia, the feelings she had developed for Damien. As she spoke, she doodled absent-mindedly in her notebook, drawing broken hearts and immediately crossing them out. Sophia listened in silence and then said something Isabella didn't expect. "You know what I think? I think this is the best thing that could have happened to you. Now you can pursue your dream of having your own event planning company." Isabella looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "With what money? What contacts? I just lost my job and my reputation in the corporate world." "But you have something more valuable," Sophia replied, pointing to the red notebook. "You have talent, ideas, and the experience of having worked with one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. No one can take that away from you." Meanwhile, in his office on the 42nd floor, Damien Blackstone worked until late hours trying to concentrate on the quarters numbers. But his mind kept returning to that morning's scene. Isabella leaving the building with her box of belongings, shoulders slumped, the vulnerability she radiated. He had stood by the window for 20 minutes, watching her figure disappear into the crowd. Patricia had been convincing with arguments that seemed professional, but hid her own prejudices. She had argued that employees were commenting on the closeness between him and Isabella, that it could affect team morale, that it was better to cut things short before more serious rumors arose. In reality, Patricia had noticed how Damien looked at Isabella during meetings, had seen the way he paid special attention to her ideas, how his voice softened when he spoke to her. As a woman who had worked years to reach her position in a male-dominated world, Patricin had developed an instinctive distrust of young, attractive women who worked close to executives. It was a bias she didn't recognize in herself, but one that influenced every one of her decisions. Damien had accepted the recommendation because he knew Patricia was right about something. He had started to feel something for his secretary, something that scared him more than any million-dollar negotiation. At 35, Damien had built a business empire after inheriting a small company from his father. He had learned to be cold, calculating, not to mix feelings with business. His relationships had always been superficial, with women from his same social circle who understood the rules of the game. But Isabella was different. She was genuine, hardworking, had a laugh that lit up the office, and a way of talking about her dreams that reminded him why he had started building his company in the first place. That night, Damien opened the bottom drawer of his desk and took out something he had kept there for a week. The white ceramic mug, with a crack that Isabella had left forgotten in the conference room. He had picked it up without saying anything, intending to return it to her. Now he held it in his hands, noticing for the first time the small details, the way she had written "I am" in permanent marker on the bottom, the crack that crossed one side but didn't prevent the mug from still being functional. The following days were an emotional whirlwind for Isabella. She signed up for unemployment insurance, updated her resume, and began looking for work with an iron determination that hid her deep pain. But every time she mentioned that she had worked at Blackstone Enterprises, the interviews became uncomfortable. Rumors had started circulating in the corporate world, like an invisible but lethal virus, that she had been fired for personal reasons, that she had had an inappropriate relationship with her boss, that she had crossed professional lines. Doors closed one after another, and with each rejection, Isabella felt she had lost not only a job, but also her reputation built with years of dedication. One afternoon, while walking through the mall after another failed interview, Isabella stopped in front of a party supply store window. She saw the balloons, decorations, colored tablecloths, and felt a pang of nostalgia. As a child, she had always been in charge of organizing family birthdays, neighborhood celebrations. It was what she loved doing most, creating special moments for other people. That night, she opened her red notebook and began to write, not sad thoughts this time, but business ideas. Small corporate events, themed birthday parties, intimate celebrations. She could start from home, with a minimal budget. She had 3 years' worth of savings, contacts in the business world, despite everything. And, most importantly, she had the desire to prove what she was capable of. The first opportunity came unexpectedly, like a ray of light in the middle of the storm. Sophia's sister needed help organizing her daughter's quinceañera. The budget was modest, almost ridiculous compared to the corporate events Isabella had coordinated, but she took it on as if it were the event of the year. She spent an entire week planning every detail with obsessive precision, from decoration to menu, from music to lighting, from the order of dances to table arrangements. It was as if all her accumulated frustration transformed into pure creativity. The day of the party, everything went perfectly. Guests couldn't stop asking who had organized everything with such care and elegance, and by the end of the night, Isabella had 3 business cards with budget requests. For the first time in weeks, she smiled with genuine joy. While Isabella began building her new future with unbreakable determination, Damien struggled against a sensation he had never experienced before. Genuine remorse mixed with a nostalgia that caught him by surprise at the most unexpected moments. Patricia kept insisting he had made the right decision, reinforcing her argument every time he showed doubts, but he couldn't get the image of Isabella leaving the building out of his mind. He had hired a new secretary, an efficient and highly professional woman who did her job without errors and maintained respectful distance at all times. But the office felt empty, sterile, as if it had lost something essential that he didn't know how to recover. One morning, while reviewing financial statements, Damien came across an invoice he didn't recognize. It was from a company called Magical Moments Events. He called accounting to ask what it was about and discovered that someone had hired this company's services to organize the marketing department's year-end party. What caught his attention most was the note at the bottom of the invoice, creating unforgettable memories, one event at a time. That phrase sounded familiar. He had heard it before, but couldn't remember where. That night, at home, he kept thinking about it until he finally remembered. Isabella used to say something similar when she talked about her dreams of having an event planning company. It can't be a coincidence, he thought. The next day, Damien did something he hadn't done in years: investigate a person for personal reasons. What he discovered filled him with a mixture of pride and guilt. Isabella had founded her own event planning company 3 months after being fired. She had a simple but elegant website, testimonials from satisfied clients, and a photo gallery of events that demonstrated exquisite tastes and extraordinary attention to detail. In the About Us section was a photo of Isabella smiling, with her red notebook in her hands, and text that moved him. After years working in the corporate world, I decided to follow my true passion, creating magical moments that last in memory. Each event is a unique story, and my job is to help you tell it in the most beautiful way possible. Damien closed the laptop and stared into space for a long time. Isabella had not only survived her firing, but had thrived. She had turned her pain into purpose, her loss into gain, and he had been responsible for pushing her toward her true destiny, though unknowingly. That same week, fate decided to intervene in the most unexpected way. The company was organizing its annual charity gala, an event that brought together the city's main business people to raise funds for charitable organizations. The event coordinator they had hired had a family emergency 2 weeks before the event and had to cancel. Patricia was desperate, calling all the event planning companies in the city, but it was high season and no one had availability for an event of that magnitude. It was the new secretary who suggested, without knowing the story, that they contact Magical Moments Events. She had seen their work at the marketing department party and had been impressed. Patricia, who didn't know the company's real name or its connection to Isabella, approved the idea without thinking twice. When Isabella received the call, she almost hung up the phone. Blackstone Enterprises wanted to hire her to organize their most important event of the year. Her first instinct was to reject the offer, but Sophia convinced her to think it over. "It's your golden opportunity," she told her. "If you organize this event and everything turns out perfect, your company will be established forever. All the important business people in the city will be there." Isabella spent an entire night awake, writing in her red notebook, weighing the pros and cons. In the end, her ambition won over her wounded pride. She accepted the job with one condition: that all dealings go through Patricia, with no direct contact with Damien. The following days were a frenzy of planning. Isabella immersed herself in every detail of the event as if her life depended on it. She hired the best vendors, designed elegant but warm decoration, planned a menu that would surprise without being pretentious. Her red notebook filled with lists, sketches, and notes. She worked 18 hours a day, but for the first time in months, she felt completely alive. Damien, for his part, had no idea who was organizing the event. Patricia had told him they had hired a new company, but hadn't mentioned the name. He was too busy with an important merger to worry about event details. The gala night arrived faster than expected. Isabella arrived at the hotel 5 hours before the event to supervise final preparations. She wore an elegant but discreet black dress, hair pulled back in a perfect bun, and, as always, her red notebook in her purse. She had promised herself she would stay in the background all night. Directing from the shadows to avoid any uncomfortable encounter with Damien, the ballroom looked spectacular. Isabella had chosen a combination of gold and navy blue that gave the place an air of sophistication without being ostentatious. Tables were decorated with centerpieces that combined fresh flowers with crystal elements that reflected the light from the chandeliers. She had created different environments within the same ballroom: an area for cocktails, another for dinner, a space for dancing, and a more intimate corner for private conversations. Guests began arriving at 7 o'clock. Isabella positioned herself discreetly near the entrance, coordinating with the waitstaff and verifying everything functioned according to plan. She saw business people she recognized from business magazines, politicians, society personalities arrive. Everyone seemed impressed with the decoration and organization. Damien arrived at 7:30, accompanied by Patricia and other board members. Isabella saw him immediately, but managed to hide behind a column. He looked exactly the same as the last time she had seen him: elegant, imposing, with that presence that made everyone in the room turn to look at him. Isabella felt her heart race and reminded herself she was there in a professional capacity, nothing more. The first part of the night went without incident. The cocktail hour was a success, the transition to dinner went smoothly, and the speeches kept guests interested without being too long. Isabella felt proud of the work she had done, but couldn't relax completely. She knew Damien could discover her identity at any moment. It was during dessert when everything changed. Isabella was in the kitchen coordinating with the chef when one of the waiters came running up. "Ms. Martinez, there's a problem with the sound system. The microphone isn't working, and Mr. Blackstone has to give the main speech in 5 minutes." Isabella felt her blood freeze. She could send someone else to fix it, but she knew she was the only one who understood the entire technical system of the event. She had no choice. She took her red notebook, checked her notes about the sound equipment, and headed toward the main ballroom. She arrived just as Damien was approaching the podium. There was a frustrated expression on his face as he tested the microphone without getting a response. Isabella approached the sound technician and quickly identified the problem. A cable had become disconnected behind the stage. In less than 2 minutes, she had fixed it. "Ready?" she whispered to the technician. "Tell him he can start now." But when she turned to move away discreetly, she found herself face to face with Damien. He had come down from the podium to see what was wrong with the sound and was now less than a meter away from her. Their eyes met and time seemed to stop. "Isabella," he murmured, and in that single word there was surprise, confusion, and something else she didn't dare interpret. "Mr. Blackstone," she replied, maintaining a professional tone, though she felt her knees trembling. "The problem is solved. You can proceed with your speech." Damien looked at her as if he were seeing a ghost. He noticed the elegant dress, the perfectly styled hair, the red notebook she held against her chest like a shield. He also noticed how she had matured in recent months, how she radiated a confidence she hadn't had when she worked for him. "You organized all this," he said, "and it wasn't a question." Isabella nodded. "My company, Magical Moments, Events. Your assistant hired us when the original coordinator canceled at that moment." Patricia approached, oblivious to the tension of the moment. "Damien, the guests are waiting for your speech." "Oh, Ms. Martinez, excellent work with the sound." Damien looked at Patricia with an expression Isabella couldn't decipher. Then he turned to her and said, "Wait for me, please. I'll finish the speech and we'll talk." Isabella wanted to say no, that there was nothing to talk about, but the words wouldn't come out. She nodded almost imperceptibly and moved away, while Damien went back up to the podium. Damien's speech that night was different from all his previous ones. He spoke about second chances, about the value of recognizing mistakes, about the importance of betting on talent, regardless of where it comes from. As he spoke, his eyes searched for Isabella in the crowd. He found her standing at the back of the room, listening attentively, and felt that each word took on deeper meaning. At the end of the speech, the applause was thunderous. Several business people approached to congratulate Damien, but he barely listened to them. He was looking for Isabella, who had disappeared during the applause. He found her on the hotel terrace, looking at the city lights. She had taken off her shoes and held them in one hand, while with the other, she clutched her red notebook. The wind gently moved her hair, and there was something in her posture that reminded Damien of the first time he had seen her in his office. Vulnerable but strong, fragile but determined. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Isabella," he said softly. She turned, and her eyes was a mixture of emotions Damien didn't know how to interpret. "Beautiful event," he said, stopping at a prudent distance. "Everything was perfect. I'm not surprised. You were always exceptional at your work." Isabella smiled sadly. "Thank you. I'm glad you were satisfied." They remained silent for a moment, both aware that there was so much to say and so little time to say it. Finally, Damien spoke. "I have to ask your forgiveness. For the way I fired you, for not investigating more before making the decision, for making you go through all this." Isabella looked at him with surprise. She wasn't expecting an apology, especially not such a direct one. "Patricia thought it was best for the company," Damien continued. "She said there were rumors that our working relationship was too close, that it could affect team morale. And I accepted because I knew she was right about something." "About what?" Isabella asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "That I had started to feel something for you, something I shouldn't have felt, considering our professional relationship." Isabella felt her heart racing. For months she had dreamed of hearing those words, but now that she heard them, she didn't know how to react. Damien continued, "But that doesn't justify the way I handled the situation. I should have talked to you, should have looked for a solution that didn't involve losing you. Losing you as an employee and losing you as the person you had started to mean to me." Isabella opened her red notebook and took out a sheet she had been keeping there for months. It was a letter she had written shortly after her firing, a letter she had never had the courage to send. "Read this," she said, handing it to him. Damien unfolded the sheet carefully. It was a handwritten letter, in Isabella's neat handwriting that he knew so well. As he read, his expression gradually changed from confusion to understanding, from understanding to regret. The letter said, "Mr. Blackstone, I'm writing this letter knowing I'll probably never send it. But I need to put into words what I feel before I forget what it feels like to love someone who can never be yours. During the 3 years I worked for you, I learned more about leadership, determination, and the importance of pursuing dreams than in all my years of university. But I also learned something I didn't expect. I learned to admire the man behind the successful businessman. I saw how you stayed up late perfecting presentations that were already perfect because you knew the work of hundreds of employees depended on those contracts. I saw how you always remembered your employees' birthdays, how you asked about our family's health, how you silently donated to charitable organizations without publicizing it. I also saw the moments when you took off the mask of implacable CEO and were simply Damien, the brother who worried about his younger sister, the son who visited his mother every Sunday, the man who kept a photo of his father in his desk drawer and looked at it when he thought no one was watching. I fell in love with that man, the real one, not the public persona. And I know that was my mistake, because mixing feelings with work never ends well. But I don't regret it, because loving someone like you taught me that I deserve a love that deep, that real. If my firing was because someone noticed my feelings, then I understand the decision. But I want you to know that I would never have done anything that could harm your reputation or the company's image. My professionalism and discretion were as important to me as my feelings toward you. I wish you all the success in the world, and I hope that someday you find someone who can love you as you deserve to be loved, completely, without reservations and with the freedom to express it. With affection and respect, Isabella. When Damien finished reading, his eyes were moist. He folded the letter carefully and returned it to her. "Why did you never send it to me?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "Because I knew it would only have complicated things more," Isabella replied. "And because part of me hoped that someday we would have a conversation like this." Damien stepped closer. "Isabella, these months I've thought about you every day. I've thought about how stupid I was, about all the things I should have done differently. But I've also thought about the future, about the possibility that someday, ... He stopped, as if not daring to finish the sentence. "Someday, what?" Isabella asked softly. "Someday we could try to be something more than boss and employee, something real, something honest, something we wouldn't have to hide." Isabella felt tears clouding her vision. For so long she had dreamed of hearing those words, but now that she heard them, she realized things had changed. "Damien," she said slowly, "these months have taught me many things about myself. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can create something beautiful from pain, that I don't need to depend on anyone to be happy." He nodded, understanding where the conversation was heading. "I'm not saying I don't feel anything for you," Isabella continued. "It would be a lie to say that. But I've built a new life, a life I'm proud of. And I don't know if I'm ready to risk that for a feeling. I don't know where it might lead." Damien felt a stab of pain, but also of respect. The woman in front of him was no longer the shy secretary who had fallen in love with her boss. She was a successful businesswoman, confident in herself, who had learned to value her independence. "I understand," he said, "and I think that's perfect. In fact, I think that's exactly the attitude the woman I've fallen in love with should have." Isabella looked at him with surprise. "Fallen in love?" Damien smiled, and for the first time in months, his smile was completely genuine. "Isabella, I fell in love with you when you worked for me, but I was too scared to admit it. I fell in love more when I saw how you handled your firing with dignity. And I've fallen madly in love watching how you've built your own company, how you've turned your talent into success." He stepped closer, until they were close enough that she could see the small wrinkles around his eyes, the ones that appeared when he smiled for real. "I'm not asking you to give up your new life," he continued. "I'm asking you to let me be part of it. Not as your boss, not as someone superior, but as your equal, as the man who admires you, not only for your beauty, but for your intelligence, your determination, your capacity for forgiveness." Isabella felt her heart beating so hard, she was sure he could hear it. She opened her red notebook and turned the pages until she reached a drawing she had made the week before. It was a sketch of an event, a small, intimate wedding in a garden full of flowers with hanging lights and round tables. In one corner, she had drawn a couple dancing, and although the faces weren't defined, there was something in the posture of the figures that suggested true love. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, showing him the drawing. Damien studied it carefully. "A wedding," he replied. "It's my dream event. Not because of the money I could make organizing it, but because I believe in true love. I believe in second chances. I believe that two people can meet at the wrong time and meet again at the right time." Damien felt his heart racing. "Are you saying that ... I'm saying I'd like to try, but we can't start from where we left off in the office. We have to start from scratch, like two people getting to know each other for the first time." Damien smiled and extended his hand toward her. "Nice to meet you. I'm Damien Blackstone. Businessman, protective brother, secret donor to charitable organizations, and as of tonight, the luckiest man in the city." Isabella laughed and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Isabella Martinez, event planner, professional dreamer, survivor of broken hearts, and, as of tonight, the most nervous woman in the city." They stood there, on the terrace, with their hands intertwined, and the city lights shining at their feet. Isabella knew it wouldn't be easy, that they would have to carefully navigate between their new relationship and their professional careers. But for the first time in months, she felt the future was full of possibilities. Damien slowly approached and caressed her cheek. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Isabella nodded, closing her eyes. The kiss was soft, tender, full of unspoken promises and shared dreams. When they separated, both were smiling. The following months were a lesson in patience and rediscovery. Damien and Isabella decided to take things slowly, building their relationship on solid foundations of mutual respect and admiration. He became her first official corporate client when Blackstone Enterprises hired Magical Moments Events to organize all their business events. But, more importantly, he became her greatest emotional support. Isabella continued living in her apartment with Sophia, maintaining her independence while slowly exploring what it meant to be in an equal relationship with someone who had once been her boss. Damien had to learn to remove the emotional barriers he had built over the years, to be vulnerable, to share not only his successes but also his fears. Their first dates were simple: coffee in small places, walks in the park, movie nights at Isabella's house where Sophia acted as the funniest chaperone in the world. Damien discovered a life he hadn't known: the simplicity of sharing pizza while planning future events, the joy of listening to Isabella laugh at her own jokes while writing in her red notebook. The real test came 6 months later, when Isabella received a proposal that would change her life. An international event company had seen her work at the charity gala and wanted to hire her to open a branch in Europe. It was the opportunity of her professional lifetime, but it meant moving to Paris for 2 years. The night Isabella told him about the offer, they were sitting on the park bench where they had had their first real conversation as a couple. She held her red notebook, but for the first time in months, she didn't know what to write in it. "It's an incredible opportunity," Damien said, though Isabella could see the pain in his eyes. "It would be stupid of me to ask you to reject it." Isabella looked at him, searching for some sign of what he really wanted her to say. "What if I don't want to go? Are you serious?" he asked, unable to hide the hope in his voice. "Paris can wait," Isabella replied. "I've waited my whole life to find something real, something worthwhile. I'm not going to run away now when we're just starting to build it." Damien took her hands. "Isabella, I don't want to be the reason you give up your dreams." She smiled and opened her red notebook to the page with the wedding drawing. "My dreams have changed," she said. "Before I dreamed of professional success, of proving what I was capable of, and I achieved it. Now I dream of something bigger, a shared life, a family, events I organize not just for clients, but for us." A year later, Isabella organized the most important event of her career, her own wedding. It wasn't an ostentatious celebration in a luxury hotel, but an intimate ceremony in the garden of the house Damien had bought for them. Exactly like the drawing she had made in her red notebook, the decoration was perfect in its simplicity: hanging lights between the trees, round tables with white tablecloths, wildflowers in simple crystal vases. The guests were the people who really mattered: family, close friends, employees who had become extended family. Sophia was the maid of honor, of course, and during her speech, she made everyone cry when she said, "I've seen Isabella organizing events for other people for years, always focused on making other people's dreams come true." Today, I finally see her organizing her own dream, and it's more beautiful than any of us could have imagined. Patricia, who had come to develop genuine respect for Isabella after seeing her professional growth, approached during the reception. "I have to ask your forgiveness," she told her. "I thought I was protecting the company, but I realized I was protecting my own prejudices. You two have proven that true love can coexist with professional success." On their wedding night, Isabella and Damien sat on the terrace of their new house. She in her simple but elegant wedding dress, he with his tie loosened and a smile that hadn't left his face all day. Between them, on the table, were the two objects that had marked their story: the white ceramic mug with the crack and the red notebook. "You know what I like most about our story?" Damien asked, taking the mug in his hands. "What?" Isabella replied, snuggling against his shoulder. "That it started with an ending. Your firing felt like the end of the world, but it was really the beginning of everything that was meant to happen." Isabella opened her red notebook to a blank page and wrote, "Sometimes the best stories start when we think everything is over. True love doesn't come when we expect it, but when we're ready to receive it." She closed the notebook and looked at her husband. Damien had learned to be vulnerable, to show his feelings, to support her dreams without trying to control them. Isabella had learned that being strong didn't mean being alone, that she could maintain her independence while building a shared life. 2 years later, when Isabella was organizing her first daughter's baptism, she found the letter she had never sent among her things. She reread it with nostalgia, remembering the woman she had been, the fears she had had, the dreams that had transformed into reality in ways she never would have imagined. Damien found her sitting on the nursery floor, surrounded by papers and with the letter in her hands. "What are you reading?" he asked, sitting beside her. "The letter I wrote you and never sent," Isabella replied. "The one I gave you that night on the hotel terrace." "And what do you think now?" he asked, taking their daughter in his arms while the baby made small sounds of contentment. "I think that woman didn't know how strong she was. She thought loving someone unreachable was her weakness, but it was actually her greatest strength. It taught her she was capable of loving deeply, and that prepared her to receive equally deep love when the right moment came." Isabella stood up and put the letter in her red notebook, which now had many more pages filled with event plans, business ideas, and reflections on motherhood and marriage. The cracked mug rested in the kitchen, where they used it every morning to share coffee while planning their day. That night, after putting the baby to bed, Isabella and Damien sat on their terrace as they had done hundreds of times before. He told her about an expansion proposal for the company he had received. She talked about the anniversary event she was organizing for a couple who had been married 50 years. "Do you think we'll make it to 50 years? Isabella asked, playing with her wedding ring. Damien looked at her with that smile he reserved only for her. "I think we'll make it to 50 and keep discovering new things about each other. I think in 50 years, you'll still be writing in your red notebook and I'll still be falling in love with every idea you come up with." Isabella snuggled against him, feeling the night breeze and listening to the sounds of the city in the distance. They had built something beautiful together, a successful business, a solid marriage, a growing family. But more than all that, they had learned that true love isn't a story that ends with a happy ending, but a story that rewrites itself every day. With small gestures of affection, conscious decisions to choose each other, and the courage to keep growing together. And so she understood that true love isn't measured by the obstacles you overcome to get it, but by the way it transforms you once you find it. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting for someone, but allowing them to love you when you're finally ready to receive it. If this story touched something in you, tell me in the comments what country you're listening from and which part moved you the most. Do you believe in second chances? Have you ever felt that an ending was actually a new beginning? Give it a like if you think we all deserve to find someone who loves us for who we really are, and subscribe for more stories that speak straight to the heart. Remember that subscribing is totally free, and with just one click, you'll be part of this family of dreamers who believe in true love.